Let me guess, you signed up for every free lead magnet and binged on every marketing YouTube video and thought, what am I missing? Why isn't my business exploding like that? Well, I can tell you, you're not alone. Whether you're just getting started or have an established business, entrepreneurship can be really lonely. But it doesn't have to be. Overcoming your fear of launching or building your personal brand or figuring out how to scale, it shouldn't be holding you back. It should be empowering you. On this podcast, we're going to deep dive into the mechanics of what it takes to build your brand, make your mark, and stake your claim in the digital marketing space. I'll be chatting with people from all walks of life and stages in their careers. I will be getting inspiration from real experts who will share their actual strategies and techniques to grow loyal and raving followings and sell more stuff. This is entrepreneurship from people who are already there making it happen. My name is Jeff Mendelson. Join me and welcome to the One Big Tip podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Jeff Mendelson, and this is the One Big Tip podcast. Today, I am speaking with Adam Mendler. He is the CEO of the Veloz Group, and he's also the host of the 30-Minute Mentors podcast. So, Adam, welcome to the show.
Jeff, thanks for having me. This is great. Excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming. So, you and I were just discussing before the show. You have, as an entrepreneur, you have your hand in a number of different businesses that are seemingly not related to each other. You have a refurbished ergonomic chair business. You also make custom cigars, and you do software development, and you got this great podcast. So I was wondering if you could take a few minutes to sort of introduce yourself and what makes Adam great.
Sure. What makes Adam great is a question that only my mom can answer, but
Nice.
I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer that one. But I am an entrepreneur. We do have these different businesses. I got into business as an entrepreneur back in 2012. Believe it or not, time flies when you're having fun. My background is working in corporate America. So I had worked for two very large financial services firms, the largest hedge fund in the world and a big bank. I had done internships for two of the largest companies in the entertainment industry. And when I was 28, I felt like if there was ever a time in my life when I was going to do something entrepreneurial, it was then and there. It was that moment in time. So I left my career and I partnered with my brother, who's a couple of years younger than me. He has a very strong software development background, and he left his career in software development, and we started the Veloz Group, named after the street we grew up on, Veloz Avenue in Tarzana, California, which is a part of LA, other side of the country of Fort Lauderdale, where you're based, Jeff, but a lot of things in common. We both have great weather, which is very important. And since my brother and I started the Veloz Group, we pushed on pretty much every idea we had, which wasn't necessarily a good thing, but we did. And, after about a year and a half of pushing on every idea we had, we realized that we had to focus or else we weren't going to be in business for much longer. And the two ideas that we had that were closest to monetization were our office furniture business, Beverly Hills Chairs, and our cigar business, Custom Tobacco. Those were the two that we focused on. We turned them into businesses. An offshoot of those two businesses was our software development company, Veloz Solutions. We recognized that entrepreneurs and middle market companies were having challenges sourcing the kind of software development skills that we were capable of providing. And those are our three businesses that we run today. I started a podcast, 30-Minute Mentors, which you mentioned. Thank you so much for the plug. I've done a lot of writing and speaking over the years. I've written a lot in Forbes and in Inc. and Huffington Post on leadership, on entrepreneurship, on management, on marketing. I started an interview series in Thrive Global, where I've interviewed hundreds of America's top leaders. And starting a podcast was just sort of the natural next step. And I said for a long time, I really want to do this. And I finally did it, and I love doing it. I'm having a great time doing it. It's a ton of fun for me and hopefully a ton of fun for listeners. I really hope that
You know, it really is, because you have this right now, especially with everyone being homebound, it's the ultimate way to network, right? It's the ultimate way to get out there and to meet people that you wouldn't necessarily meet, you know, like on the street, or, you know, or at an office or wherever it is. So it's really a great, it's really a great medium to put that out there.
Totally.
One of the things that that I wanted to discuss with you today was your one big tip. And what's interesting for me about this is that and you alluded to this a little bit in your introduction, is that you had your hand in a number of different projects, some of them not as successful as others, and you figured out fairly quickly what it is that makes you great at doing one part of the business, and other things that you had to, okay, this isn't going to work, and jettison that off to the side. What would you say is the was your process for coming up with that criteria for what to keep, what to jettison, and how to, and what was your process for moving forward with those businesses?
Really good question, Jeff. And I wish that we had a great framework for doing it. There are much better frameworks for deciding what businesses to move forward with and what businesses not to, that I understand much better now, that I use now as I think through either what kind of businesses to pursue or even what kind of projects to pursue within our businesses. But back then, it was truly out of desperation. We had pushed on all the ideas that we had. And after a year and a half, we literally had burned through all of our savings. And we're at this inflection point where we either had to focus on the businesses that were closest to making money so that we could support ourselves and support our overhead and keep the lights on, or close up shop and go get jobs, which we didn't want to do. So we didn't really have a choice. And I don't think that's the best framework for figuring out what businesses to incubate. It's certainly not a framework that I advocate, but it was the gun to your head framework. And it was one that we ultimately, when you have a gun to your head, you're forced to make decisions that you live with. And fortunately for us, the two businesses that we push forward with have been businesses that have gone on to become national companies servicing, many, many, many happy customers all across the country. In the case of our office furniture business, across the world. So in that case, it's worked out well for us, but it isn't a framework that I recommend to other entrepreneurs. But I also have come to learn that the best source of learning is learning in the school of hard knocks, learning from your mistakes, learning by doing things wrong rather by doing things right.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So once you've taken those ideas, right, the Beverly Hills chairs and the custom tobacco, how did you define for yourselves whether it would be a success or whether it would just be another project that you were pushing forward? Did you have a metric? Did you have like a number in your head on what would have been like, okay, if we can reach this, then it'll be successful, we can move on?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jeff. I wish we were that sophisticated. We were in fight or flight mode. And when you're in fight or flight mode, you're really just kind of focused on keeping the lights on. And our first year and a half, it was a ton of fun. We had a great time. We were in sort of this highly creative period in our company. We had lots and lots of interesting and exciting projects we were working on. We had lots of really smart and talented people working with us in our company. It was really fun. We just weren't making money, which you need to do as a business when you're self-funded. When you're self-funded, I mean, if you are raising investor capital, it's a completely different ballgame. When you're going out and running a business that is financed by you and by your savings, you don't have a lot of runway, and you sort of have to do things in a very smart, strategic way, which we didn't do. And once we kind of learned the hard way, it forced us to really run the business as shrewdly as possible. And we really learned how to become successful entrepreneurs, again, really through the school of hard knocks. I went to business school for 6 years, Jeff, believe it or not. People who look at
Actually,
my
so did
bio,
I.
and people who look at my bio say, "Oh, went to two great business schools, 4 years at USC Business School, 2 years at UCLA Business School," and they were great experiences. And I love both schools, and I'm still pretty involved at both universities and both business schools. But if you really want to learn as an entrepreneur, you have to go and do it, and that's next level learning. And interestingly enough, on my podcast, I've interviewed a lot of great entrepreneurs. I actually just recently interviewed the co-founder of Square, and the episode hasn't aired yet, but it's going to air in June. And in my conversation, his name is Jim McKelvey, and in my conversation with Jim, one of the things we talked about was the success that Jim had. Jim started 7 different companies, one of which is a $20 billion company, Square. And Jim, one of the questions I asked Jim was, what is your advice for people on how to start a business and, yada, yada, yada. And one of the things I mentioned to him is for those of us who didn't necessarily study in business school or don't have MBAs. And one of the things Jim said to me is getting an MBA, going to business school, studying in entrepreneurship classes, don't worry about it. That's not going to make or break your ability to be an entrepreneur. What really matters.
I wholeheartedly agree with that as well.
Jeff, you get it. I mean, you're an entrepreneur, you understand. You have a very diverse and broad range of experiences. So listeners who are tuning in, I'm sure, gotten that message from you.
What's interesting about that is that at least when I was, so I didn't follow the traditional route of right after high school, go to college, and then right after college, get an MBA, right? Right after high school, I was like, I'm out of here. I went and I traveled around, tried to find myself. And I must have reinvented myself maybe like 6 times already.
Yeah.
And each time, you come out of that process, in a different shape, right? Different facets of, that you bring your experience to the table. But at the same time, they all build upon themselves, right? They all, like for the time, for example, that I worked in Mexico. I worked in Mexico City for 3 years. And even though I wasn't management in this position, I was for the first time put in a position where I was responsible for some pretty big systems, right? And I was able to take that experience and move it forward to after I rotated back to the US. And then after I rotated to some of the other countries that I've worked in. What happens though is that even when you're learning these concepts, when you go to B school, you learn a little bit more about accounting, you learn a little bit more about finance. You realize like, okay, yeah, these are great concepts and I can apply them today, right? And I think that once we take that information and apply it, it really comes down to picking and choosing what works for me, what works for you, and applying it to our businesses. Because I think that every business is different. I also think very differently about competition, for example, like digital marketing, we're a dime a dozen, right?
Sure.
But what happens is that some people are going to look to my style of how things should be done and be enamored by it. Others are going to be like, oh no, that's toxic, and move on, right? So what happens is I need to make sure that my business is speaking to the right market. It's speaking to the right people that will light up to the type of entrepreneurship that I bring to the table. And I think that's very similar to yours as well. I think that if you're, like you said with Veloz Solutions, while you are doing custom development and consulting for other companies, you're also applying those concepts to your own businesses, the chairs and the tobacco, because at the end of the day, the foundations that you learn in B school and the foundations that you implement in the custom software development it's very, very similar, right? These
Totally.
processes are all there. So it's very advantageous for you to zoom in and take advantage of them, not just for your own businesses, but also for your client businesses as well.
Jeff, you could not have said it better. I couldn't have said it better. You nailed it, which is why you're the host of the show.
Thank you. So, Adam, thank you very much for that. Why don't you tell people where they can reach you, how they can get to your podcast, and what would be the next what would be the next steps if they want to reach out and contact your company?
Sure. So, Jeff, I try to make it very easy for your listeners and for everyone. It's just my name, Adam Mendler. So you can go to adammendler.com. It's my website. You can find me on social media, on Instagram or on Twitter, at Adam Mendler. My podcast is 30-Minute Mentors, all spelled out. You can find it at 30minutementors.com. You could also find it on your favorite podcasting app, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher. Just punch in and spell out 30-Minute Mentors. And Jeff, this was a pleasure. Really excited to have the opportunity to chat with you, and look forward to connecting with any listeners who are interested in anything that we talked about. And hopefully you get a chance to listen to 30-Minute Mentors, because it's something that I've really poured my heart and soul into. And hopefully it's something that you'll enjoy and appreciate.
You got it, man. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Jeff. This was great.